All right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in the previous video series, I did talk to you guys real briefly here. Here, let me just kind of make a little more room. I did talk to you guys briefly about various ways to increase the tip weight of your bow. And one of the ways that I suggested um, was to weight the tips. So before I dunk this one, I wanted to show it to you. I cut brand new leather strips, made a nice tight wrap with Mason's twine, and I am going to do the exact same thing here. Oops. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm taking the raw material. Remember, I was talking about thinning it? I've always thinned it, thinned it, thinned it. Okay, in this case, I'm not thinning it anymore. I want this bow to be really, really strong. So I'm going to keep doing this while I coat the limb. And the whole time, I'm going to be letting this leather soak in as much as I possibly can of this. Now, I had already added a little bit of thinner to this mixture, as you guys will recall, and it turned out now this whole thing is the perfect consistency with no further adjustments from me. And so this is one way. It's kind of like waxing the tip. All I'm doing is putting as many layers on that as I can get. So what I'm going to have to do is hold it over something. And basically what I'll do is I'll put it into that same glass that I was using before. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide this over and lean this down for a second and leave it like that while I go get my setup. So come with me and we're just going to grab this. Now, as you can see here, I just wanted to show you this. After cleaning it out, it's really not that bad. It's not nearly as messy as working with, say, silicone, but it is in the same ballpark. So what we've already got our material and we've already got something to put it in, but we're going to need to treat our brush, which means we need some warm water and some thinner mixed together, and that'll be enough because I just want to clean my brush and I won't need that right now, which is cool. I also know that thermally speaking, I never felt it even remotely get warm, which means we're good to go there. So I'm going to pop this out. I'm going to put this aside. Ooh, kinky. Bad mojo. Bad mojo. Also, I knew this might expand a little bit, guys. And the reason is, as soon as you add the thinner, it does expand a little. Now for this, I'm just putting, that's it, the tiniest amount, because all this is for is to clear my brush, and that's just fine. Now, I did decide that I want this bow to be absolutely as strong as is really possible. Not so much, it's just, yeah, I'm not happy with its strength. It's really weak. And as some bows settle, they get way stronger. And unfortunately, this one's going the other way. But even if this method with this material doesn't increase the overall poundage vastly, this is just the beginning. Remember I said I'd have that whole thing into the bow usually? Now this won't take that much because it's not absorbing as much. The materials involved aren't going to be able to absorb as much, but it's really good at coating things, guys. So I'm just going to keep dunking this over and over and over again for the next little while. Now I'm going to suspend it just above here. Aha, kinky. You can watch me try, but might not have much of an eye. So I'll try and do it right here so you guys can see maybe a little better. All right, so I'm taking another brand new brush. And as you can see, of course, I'm doing this all unbowed again. And I'm just going to keep bringing it down. And this helps to make sure that that leather is going to get as soaked in as it can possibly be. Now, the leather and the rest of it is just getting coated, but the leather in the bottom is getting absolutely soaked right through, you guys. And that is a serious thing because that is what I want. I want it to be a serious thing. I don't want this bow to be super light poundage. And if it's going to be super light poundage, there are things I can do to assure that it still retains really nice arrow speeds, and that is what this is all about. For me, a bow isn't a success unless I am getting well over 300 feet per second, and this bow, right at the edge of its performance, was capable of that, and it still is. I verified that, and it is shooting the little arrows better than it did to start with, but it settled and the poundage dropped off, and now it feels like it's so light to shoot. It's actually kind of shocking to me that it shoots as well as it does, and it's at that point where it's almost too light to really be satisfying, because I made it trying really hard not to damage the limbs. Truth is, I could have made this one a little more powerful, but it's all good. Okay, so I have thoroughly treated this end of it now. I'm going to set down my brush. And now I'm just going to hold this and try and keep it so it doesn't really drip more than it's needing to. And I'm just going to take that brush and I'm going to do the same thing you saw me do earlier and just kind of remove any excess and scooch that off back into the container. I figure this is a good method too, and it does work, and it keeps it less drippy. So I'm just putting this on the edge of the container, getting it all off, put it back in, whichever, it's fine. Won't kill nothing if I put some back in. As long as I'm not putting in clumps or anything. It's going back into a mixture that is essentially containing a small amount of thinner, don't forget. So it'll be fine. And I'm noticing that now that I have my mixture right, it's actually really nice, guys. It's working really well. So now all I want to do is take it so that it doesn't drip. And then when I flip it around and start dipping the other way, I just watch for drips coming down the other way and draw them back and forth and kind of thing until they're none. And this looks good, actually. This looks real good. All right, so I'm seeing nothing else major. I'm seeing it looks well coated all the way around. I'm going to flip her and dip her. And now this end just sits there and soaks in thoroughly while I start to treat here. And again, I'm going right up to the edge of my riser, all the way up. Look up, all the way up. You guys remember that? Jolly Green Giant? Man, I'm old. That was in the 80s. When I was a kid, early 80s. So now we're just continuing on here. I'm going to do the same on the front side because this one I really do want it to get stronger. I'm using a thicker mixture that's less thinned. And I will say too, I'm really liking the way that looks like it's treating the leather. It just looks like before when I was a kid. I realized later, like I said, it may not go up. In fact, there's been so many videos in this series already. I've started to have to delete some of them. So I don't know how many are going to go up, but what I will say is that I always make sure that in a serious video series like this, now the RC Sailboat one is different, man. I mean, a company got into my phone and deleted a lot of my videos by accident when they tried to hack it and steal a whole bunch of stuff. And instead, they screwed themselves because while I was going to sell it to them exclusively, as long as they were willing to build me the boat and pay me decent, like as long as I was going to get one of the vessels. And instead, they agreed to all that, offered me way more than I expected off the cuff without even hearing my terms. And then instead, didn't come to do business at all and stuck cameras into my apartment and hacked my phone and all kinds of crap. So that sucked. But now that this is thoroughly soaked in on the tip, we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to bring this out and I'm going to lightly dust it off. Kind of like archaeology, only we're bringing it out of liquid. Instead of dirt. You can see how much neater that looks after, right? I mean, it's so much nicer. And the real trick is this way, when I pull it out, I won't have a ton of trips. It'll be much nicer. And then I'm just going to set it down somewhere where it's kind of balanced on the two in the middle on the riser. And it's for stuff like this. I don't actually treat the riser as part of this. I'm just going to set it down, give it a quick shake. I'm looking at the top now in some light to see if I'm seeing some drip down. And I'm just going to take that now that I've dipped it in the water and the thinner. And I'm just going to lightly draw down with the thinned mixture on the brush just to bring it down. And that actually looks really good and just helps to smooth things out a little bit too, but real light. And it looks like it's perfect. It looks like I don't even have to, guys. That came out really good. And this is looking like it's going to as well, because I did a good job at taking out most of the excess. I'm really not seeing a ton of drips here. That's good. But again, I've only done one real thick layer here, and this brush is absolutely junked. It's already junked, like really trashed. And so I'm feeling like I'm doing really thick layers here, and this is good. Now I've thoroughly soaked those tips, and that will give it more feet per second, guys. Feet per second is what it's all about. And combine that with impact momentum. Now, if I'm adding significant weight to the tips, as I said, this is heavy stuff. When I add significant weight to the tips like this, that is a big deal. And because I'm adding it more at the tips than anywhere else in this case, not just from the leather wrap. In earlier videos, I have showed one of the traditional native techniques was actually to do just that and basically leather wrap the tips. And then what they can do, it's smart, they can just dip it in water and it adds a whole bunch of weight to the tip right away, which is really smart when you think about it, guys. And it works really good for them. And so when I saw that in a Navajo village, I was like, wait, what? And you're going to be like, wait, you never went to a Navajo village, dude. Actually, I did. And it's kind of a cool story. And since we've got a few more minutes, I'm going to tell it to you. So I was in the bush when I was a little kid. It's actually what got me into boyering. So it's appropriate that I tell you guys this story. And it got me into boyering because I was in the bush and I had come prepared with provisions, and me and a friend had left in a canoe. We had been planned to go for a set amount of time. I think it was a week. Only my friend, we basically got ourselves into the canoe. He insisted on kind of going one direction, but he really didn't know where he was going. He was supposed to be navigating. He got us wickedly lost. After that, I took over the navigation and dealt with the whole lost thing, but we were already 3 days into a trip. And at this point, we had gone 3 days way farther than we expected because, well, he hadn't counted for the fact when we planned our trip that when you're in a canoe and you're traveling over distance, guys. Okay, just to verify, I've got a no drip scenario, and I'm just going to keep looking. Now, this can be pretty thick stuff, and if it's not too thinned, it'll just congeal. No, it just clears as it dries and gets really nice. Now, this stuff is really heavy, and you can see that unlike the other parts where I've just coated this, I've really soaked this leather, and you can tell by the color, this is thoroughly soaked. But this stuff hardens, and when it hardens, it will maintain a lot of weight in that leather, and that is a good thing. That tip will not be done either. Every time I coat the bow, I soak the tip again and make sure it gets so thoroughly soaked in there each time and so hardened each time that by the time this is done, I've also made sure my tiller is correct before starting this procedure so that it bowed perfectly and all that stuff, so that, and then did my wraps and checked my tiller and made sure it was perfect while I was doing my wraps, made them really tight so nothing would move. And now I paint it and solidify that in place. But I wanted to start with the rod separate so I could get right in between and underneath and really strengthen the rod, because these tend to delaminate over time. And part of the process that I used to do with wood, I've noticed had the same effect on wood that tended to laminate, that it just made it rock solid once it seeped right in. So I'm hoping this is as good as that, but there's only one way to find out, guys. I have to do it. And I have to find out through experiment. And that takes time. I mean, the last series took almost a year before I really came out with a bow I was happy with. Heck no. But I took a year and thoroughly destructed every bow that I made until I found ones that didn't. And one of the earliest ones is still here and shooting strong. And all the ones I've made later, I mean, most of those are still here. It was only really the light bows. And when I had a rod quality problem where it had some internal flaw and just started popping as soon as I started to draw it hard. Um, but if you get past that part, a lot of them are really solid. But that's no different than boyering with wood. It really is about the same. Anyway, this one is just meant to be a quick update because I started doing this and it reminded me of the Navajo technique and something else I had done as a kid. See, I didn't do it with the leather in the water and soak the leather like that. I realized that if I wrapped them in leather and then soaked them in my material that hardened and made it had a lot of weight, it's a lot heavier stuff than water, guys. And because of that, it'll add a lot more power than water would. Same as my string. You guys saw in previous videos that I waxed the string and then soaked it in water and showed you the difference after I waxed it and then showed you the difference after I soaked it in water. And it was a noticeable difference in feet per second in penetration each time, stepping it up nicely on the same brace height, same bow, same arrow, same string, 15 minutes apart from each other. And so you can see for yourselves in those videos exactly how this works. And this is going to be no different. In fact, I can already feel when I hold the bow that it now has more weight. And after soaking the tips, I can really start to feel that weight in the tips. And that's actually a really good thing. This bow was really feeling too light in weight and too light in poundage. And I'm doing my best to fix both of those. But again, I do not know how good this treatment is. If it was my old treatment, I know I could just keep treating it over and over again. And eventually it'll be so hard that I would be sad that I kept going. And so I don't want to do that. All I want to do is just bring it up to the point where I'm happy with it. And it's about 50 pounds at its back end. It will be my lighter bow, but that'll be firing 24 inches. That should put it right around 40 pounds at 20, which would be perfect for firing those little 20-inch arrows. Speaking of the little 20-inch arrows, I also felt like it was time for an update on those. I now have a small pile of shattered ones right here because I have officially shattered the third one. And it wasn't because I fired it from too high a poundage a bow. In fact, it was because this one has a really long draw weight and it's really such light poundage that I overdrew the arrow and misfired and went off and shot and hit my riser box, which is why I keep it there. It's in line for deflections, and it came off just smoking. And when it bounced off that box, it bounced off hard enough to shatter the arrow in half and snap it clean like a twig. So, didn't damage anything, of course. I have a good setup for that. I specifically engineered it for that, as I've covered, but I still broke my third arrow today. So, that is only showing, though, that these are really picking up arrow speed. And just because I'm not happy with the poundage yet doesn't mean it didn't make an improvement. I did shoot videos, before and after I treated it the first step and then shot it, and it did make a noticeable difference. It wasn't significant in poundage at all, but it made the string a lot stiffer. It made the string so much stiffer. I'm really happy with that. And I'm really quite excited about it actually. But I am seeing that it may take a ton of material and many, many coats to really make this at the poundage that I want. Now I'm just going to roll this over and see the other side if there's drips forming, and I don't see any, which is actually a really good sign that I got this right. But because I'm not looking too close to the other end right now, I'm just going to flip it anyway, just to make sure there's no drippy from the other one. So this is looking perfect. Again, you're looking at the other side of this same end, and it's thoroughly soaked through, guys. This is what I want to see. Abso-freaking-lutely. And if my rod moves, I want to move it back because when I'm done, this will be getting pretty hard. So at this point, I'm going to cut out, guys. This is just a quick update on where we are right now and the techniques I'm using. At this point, there is no more thinner except to thin my brush. And I just put it straight in and dip the end. I will soak that end every time. I am not treating the other bow like this because I'm not trying to increase its poundage. Or now the only problem I've had with increasing the weight like this is it increases the hand shock. But with the leather wrap on this and then the clear hockey tape after that, it's so damped, it's so soft in the hand I actually want the more feel anyway. It feels too light, and this will help with that. At least it's more satisfying when you release an arrow. And since in the last video I had no wrap on here, and that is something significant because prior to that treatment, I had a wrap on here and I took it off to treat it. So on those two ends, it lost weight, didn't have the tiller holding in place by anything but the string, and was still faster shooting than it had been beforehand. So it is still increasing. It did feel maybe a pound or so stronger, but that was a fallacy. It's like it felt that way at first, but as soon as I started shooting it, it broke in and that disappeared. But I know why. And it's because technically I was a little concerned of what would happen if I let it harden. And so I started shooting it before it hardened just to make sure it wouldn't wreck it. And in the end, I lost the pound that I had gained, but I even still, it was significantly faster in arrow speed than it had been prior to the treatment, which means I'm on the right path. In prior experience, that was pretty much how the other treatment behaved as well. So I am doing each layer thicker and then just letting it harden completely. And then instead of boiling it or trying to shoot it, like I did last two treatments, just so I could see where it was at and kind of notice for myself any differences, I'm not doing that. I now know this is very much like the old treatment I was using, and I'm going to have to do at least 10 full treatments, like layers, like each time I treat it. It's like you just saw where I do two layers basically front and back. Plus, at the same time, now I'm weighting the tips and I'm going to make these so hard, guys, that they're not going to be like the other bows. The short bow doesn't need it. As you could see, it's really sweet poundage. I just want to lock it in the way it is. It's coming along beautifully, and there it is. And so now I want to show you what I was talking about. So I have filled in one of the videos recently, I was just showing you that this has filled up the pocket really nicely. And over a couple of treatments, 3, I have filled that back in, and now there's just that little tiny bit that needs to add some more. And here, this is really important, guys, because I put in a whole bunch of really liquidy stuff at the top. It never dripped through at all and didn't even come down to fill that hole, which means my mission was successful. In the first 2 treatments, don't forget this was hollow. In the first 2 treatments, I added enough in here to kind of help seal it up and to really shrink those gaps. I put in the first treatment, and then in the second treatment, I filled this in with a thinned out version that really got in there and sealed it right in. And then on this version, I put in a slightly thicker thinned version that got right in there and filled it right up. And unlike last time where I saw it slowly drain out into the handle, and it all is in there now, which is great because none of it came out the bottom, and I can see and prove that. And then on the other side, it settled right deep, which means it filled a pocket from about here to here, and then all that drained inside from to about here. That's as deep as it could go, and maybe to here. And that's it, which is perfect, guys. That's strengthening the core center of the riser, and that's really, really important. And because I have put that much of this kind of liquid, even hours and hours later, it's now 3-4 hours later, this, or actually about 3 hours later after I finished this one, it's still pretty white, and all the rest of it is clear. It's perfect. I can handle it. I can shoot it. It's fine. It doesn't make a noise. It's perfect. But some of that is still liquid enough to the touch that if I touch the inside portion of that, it's soft. But out here, it's hard, even though it's still white, because it's still soft in the core and it still needs to solidify. So I'm going to wait until this is totally solid, but it's solid enough that it's not dropping the level of this anymore. And it's perfect because once that's sealed, you can see that's going to be truly watertight. And that is part of the goal, guys. I want to seal this for longevity, which means I don't want to see nasty shimmies. I want to see locked in, watertight, airtight kind of performance because that's going to make this a lot more solid. And if I should be in a canoe and it should turn over or any of that, that would be a problem. So the story of the canoe and what got me into boyering. Well, here we go. So, when I was a little kid, I had gone on a canoe trip with a buddy of mine. Now, my mom gave us permission because I routinely went off into the bush. And as I was saying, he got us really, really lost. And I kind of had to take over the navigation. Now, once I showed him, hey, this is the way out, he went, oh, you bastard, kind of a thing. Are you guys still recording? Okay, you are. And he basically freaked at me for not like telling him sooner which way out was, because I pretty much let him lead for the 3 days, thinking he was smart enough to do it. No, I could see he was lost, but I was trying to be nice about it, and I didn't want to be a dork. So I just kind of let him lead, and he did okay. He didn't even do that bad, but he basically was in a huff about the fact that he had been the leader and got us lost, is what that really is. Now, obviously, I won't say his name, but he was a nice guy, and I didn't really have any problem with him. He was fine. We did have a nice trip up until that, but it was just frantic, and it turned what was a really nice camping trip into a nightmare. So, long story short, he takes off and heads back for town. I decide, no, we planned on going deeper into the bush, and now that I know where I am, I'm fine. But by the time I was halfway done that trip, I did stay out longer than expected. Um, and in the end, I ended up pretty darn hungry because I ran out of provisions. He had taken most of it with him, and I ended up really regretting that. And so, for my own survival, I realized I was going to have to do something to feed myself, or I probably wasn't going to make it out of there. Because by the time I was done, it had taken me, I guess, about a week solid of hiking to get to where I finally started camping. Then I stayed there for almost a week, and I had already been out of food for like 2.5 days. I was starting to get weak, and I knew that that was a problem. And now I was going to have to camp out and pack out all my shit for a full week of hiking. And I knew I wasn't up for it, to be perfectly honest with you. I knew I didn't have it in me. I was already pretty weakened from not having eaten. I really shouldn't have given him all the goddamn provisions, but I did. And so I realized I had a real problem. I knew how to make basic snares. So I started making snares, and I realized they just weren't catching me a meal. And in the past, when I had camped and needed to eat like that, I had gotten something with a snare, and it had always kind of worked for me. So I waited a day and night, and I still hadn't caught anything. And I was getting really desperate. At this point, my stomach was just a aching. I had absolutely nothing to eat for 3 days or two and a half, and I was really stressing out about it. I was starting to cry and freak out about it, and I kind of prayed about it. And the next thing you know, I got this little voice, and it was mine inside my head. So, dude, dumbass, you don't need God to solve this for you. You know how to build a bow. Think about it. You learned how. And I'm like, I hadn't had lessons at that point or any of that. I had learned how, and I did know how. So I started looking for the things I needed. I put together literally the crappiest bow I've ever made, but it did shoot straight, and it took like 3 attempts. But by the time I was done, the end of the day, I had a bow that shot straight, and I had made my first kill with it. And it was, I can't even remember. I think I got a bird and some squirrels, and I put those together, and I had a good meal. And I was grateful, man. I was praising God after that, believe you me. And it was like, I remember the feeling it gave me when I had made this bow, that it was like this confidence that I had in myself at that point, that I could go into the wilderness alone and survive, and not just survive, but thrive. I had up to that point built myself a nice little camp area and all that. And it really was working out nicely for me, except for the whole food department. But the second I got the bow, that changed night and day. It also led to some very cool experiences. Right after I made the bow, it's one of the reasons I stayed so long, was I killed a porcupine on my second hunt, I think the second day. And I noticed there seemed to be a couple of them, and one of them fired quills at me, and I fired back, and he missed, and I killed him dead. I ducked, and I killed him dead quick. And I was really glad I did. And I saw this big cat, and for a second I thought she was going to attack me. She was all black, mountain lion, and she was gorgeous. And only I looked and I saw she had something in her mouth. At first I thought she was open mouthed and kind of threatening me because I could see her top row of teeth, but then it occurred to me I couldn't see her bottom row, and it looked like she had no bottom jaw at all. And I thought she was injured, and she was kind of staring at me. And I noticed she had a couple porcupine quills in her. And then I looked at what was in her mouth and I realized it was a baby and it had porcupine quills in it too. So it wasn't really badly hurt, but it had one right through the hip, and I knew it wasn't going anywhere for a couple of days. And the mother was in a similar condition and had one right through her muzzle, and it looked really painful. But she was really cool when she saw me do. She brought the baby right to me and laid it down in front of me when she saw me make the kill. And so I guess they had just had a tussle. It was missing most of its quills, and that was the one that had done it to her. So she was really grateful. And the next thing you know, I have this amazing experience of doing first aid on this baby and nursing him back to health over the next week and or so. And I ended up my what was supposed to be a week trip turned into 2 weeks, and then into almost 3 weeks by the time I got out of there in the end. And my mom, no, come to think of it, I was gone a full month. And my mom was pissed, but it was okay. It was during summer vacation, and it was mine to do with as I pleased, as she put it. So I did. And after that, I made it a tradition where every summer I went into the bush, and each year over the next 3 years, I went progressively deeper and stayed progressively longer until my stay included the entire summer and me skipping school and staying in the bush for months to take care of animals and do first aid on animals and hunt porcupines. And mom was freaking. Even my dad, he's like, son, I raised you a hunter, boy, and I'm glad and all, but damn, son, like you do got to go to school. You know that, right? And I'm like, yeah, are you sure? Because the bush didn't tell me that. And he laughs so hard, you know. But at the end of the day, hey, I'm here, eh? And it's okay, eh? So yeah, there's that. Anyway, this one's getting pretty long again, but guys, in the end, I've had a great experiences in my life with archery, and my camping experiences went to a whole new level, and my survival capabilities went to a whole new level because I had a bow. And ever since then, I won't go without what I need to make a bow. And when I do, the very first thing I did was start looking. And I made it a tradition that every time I went for a camp, the first thing I did was build a bow. Because at the end of each camp, I would leave my bow with a note that explained that I had made it for my survival and that I was done with it and that I was glad to have somebody else enjoy it. And I left it at a very particular, very popular campsite that was nearby where I went. So that was here in Ottawa, Canada, and that was in the 90s, early 90s. And I only did it for, I think, 4 years or 3 years. And after that, I really wasn't able to do it anymore, but I miss it. And I really love getting back to building bows and all that stuff. And it's really made me hankering to go out and do some wilderness stuff again. So I am going to do that. I have a good tent. I have all the gear that I need. And guess what that means? Mind you, it's winter now, and while I have done winter camping and winter survival, it's not really the best time for me to go in there. And really, the best time is right and spring, right before the first thaw, really, because the first really warm weather, when the ground is warm, is when the porcupines will start trying to get into their burrows. And you might wonder why I go after porcupines, and I'll tell you this: best survival tip I can give you guys, if you're a bow hunter, if you're a bowman, you like to shoot, okay, you're going to be in the bush, yo, hunt porcupines. You may say, why? That's not what I want to eat. Hell with eating. Kill them. And the reason is you're doing all the wildlife a favor. Their babies will be 10 times more likely to survive if they're in a Canadian forest without porcupines around. They are a huge threat to the babies, and there really aren't that many other predators. So most of the animals will leave alone the babies of a predator like that. And we do need them in our ecosystem. So please be kind, shoot to kill, and don't miss. And take care of the animals, man. They're taking care of you by providing you with that meal. And, you know, there's a lot to be said for living with nature. And what I learned was I could kill and feed the animals and provide care for them, and they'd be sleeping in my tent, man. Because it didn't just happen once, man. It happened over and over and over again. Every time I went, it was the same story over and over again. So many animals injured by these porcupines that it was like literally I walked into a war. and I hadn't realized it, but the first time I actually had to build dirt fortifications around my tent because the porcupines were coming up to my tent and trying to spit me through the tent, punching their thorns through it. So I decided that I had to build little embankments. And I mean, I literally had a little fortress there set up around my tent, which I will repeat. And it's because of that. It wasn't meant to keep out people, but it does a good job of that too, because it raises a bank about half the height of my tent, all the way around my tent, leaves an opening about the width of a door, which I build a fire in the middle of at night. And that is my fire pit. And it's awesome because it keeps animals from coming in. Really good trick. But what I like to do is put my tent up against a place where I have a rock wall or something at the back of me, so I can just build that little berm around the sides of my tent, leave the doorway in the middle, and then I've got my in and out, and I got my fire in the middle, and I like to leave about 4 feet in between, at least 2 or 3 feet in between my tent and the wall, so that I have room to kneel behind it, and that's really what it's for. I was kneeling behind it and hiding from the quills while I shot arrows over the top of it to kill the little bastards, and it worked great. That being said, I'm going to get going. But I do wish you all the best, and I hope you survive and thrive in the world, and I hope you contribute good things to it, and I hope you hunt, man. But not for pleasure, man. Don't murder things for pleasure. Hunt for survival, man. Hunt because you're there and you care. Feed the animals, take care of them, and you will see they take care of you in a big way, man. And I'll say more in future videos, but for now, just know that I've had enough experiences with animals to really have lived in the wild for a really long time, and just survived there completely off the animals. And the animals have been awesome to me, and I've been awesome to them. And if you don't think those two things are related, you're wrong. You put out bear traps, bears are gonna hate you, man. You don't think that they know what a bear trap is? You're an idiot. They're not that stupid, man, and they're vicious things. They do a lot of harm. So one of the things I always do is when it's a campsite or an area I'm surviving in, I take down traps and I kill porcupines. If you really want to make friends with the animals, take down traps, kill porcupines. They will love you for that shit, and you will not be getting eaten by the local bears or by the local big cats. You want to know the secret to surviving in the wilderness? Don't be an ass, and they won't want to eat you. Don't sit there in front of them and eat their kills and cook it on your fire at your campsite and eat it and expect them not to want some. Yo, I plan for that ahead of time. Where I make my kill, I butcher it right there. I leave as much of it as I can for them. I only take what I need to survive. I might take the skin, the leather, the head, so I have the antlers so that I can make a good bow out of it. Best bows in the world, man. And so I hope to get another one. I want to make another bow out of a deer antler set. It doesn't even take a really big buck. You don't want a 10 pointer for that. You want more like a 6 to 8 pointer is perfect. You want a nice short bow, 6 point. You want a good medium size, good size bow that's stronger, go 8 point. And you get a beautiful 8 point buck, man, with the right shape to its horns. And they are so nice, man. Such nice bows I can make out of those. So that's my hope for my trip, is that I'm going to take one of these bows and bag myself a deer. Keith out.